Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in bountiful Bakersfield, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today you are tuning in to Spell It Out, Magic, Reflections, and Shadows, where I take a topic and run with it. Today, I was inspired by the fact that the Chinese New Year says it's the year 2025 of the wood snake, to talk about the symbolism of the snake. And I also am going to share what the I Ching advises us to do for the year, because it was really interesting. I threw the I Ching this year for the first time. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Sorry about last week. We had some audio issues, a cable that went bad, so we didn't want to keep our guests hanging around too long while we were trying to sort that out. So next week, we will take another run at it. We will have Marnie and Carrie Jane here. Maybe Caroline will pop in. Unfortunately, she just lost her dad, so our hearts go out to her and our sympathies and our best wishes. But we will do our prediction show hopefully next week, and then the rest of the month to follow. Get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SXTH, all spelled out. While you're there, if you can afford to, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi, helps us cover some of our costs. But the most important thing is, if you're watching on YouTube, click like and subscribe. Tell your friends about us. Help us grow our show. And don't forget, our book, Tarot Alchemy, a Kabbalah-inspired approach to reading the cards, is now available on Amazon. You can search it under books. If you look under general, you'll never find it, or look for our authors pages. And thank you to those who have supported us, and not just by buying the book, but with such incredibly good feedback about it. So we're very, very thrilled. So I'm not going to take up a lot of time because it's a short show today. So I'm going to kick it back to you. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And one other thing about our book, we are going to have a book signing, but it was delayed, our printed books. And so hopefully we'll get them soon, and we will announce for people that want to come to our book signing in Bakersfield. We'll announce when we get closer to it, and we have the physical copies of the books. So I was doing part of this preparation for next week's show, and I realized I have maybe a little too much information that I could sort of share here, and then we'll do more with sort of the astrology and numerology in our prediction show. And I was listening, first of all, I enjoyed listening to different people's take on what the wood snake year is, because some of it agrees with some of the major astrology, and some of it was just a little different and really interesting. So I listened to about 3 different people talking about the wood snake, and there were some common ideas. One was transformation. Another one was strategic moves based on how snakes move. So that was interesting. Another couple were intuitive information. And then there was a couple quotes I pulled from the 3 YouTubes that I listened to, which I'm going to link their YouTubes underneath the show so you can listen to the whole thing. But I grabbed a couple of quotes from each of the 3. One was Donna Stellhorn in Practical Intuition Energy Signature. She says, quote, "Overall energy is about taking all of the knowledge, all of the information you have, and applying it to something practical," end quote. And then I also listened to Susan Chan, who does Feng Shui with her information. And this was called 2025 Wood Snake Year, Feng Shui Tips You Need. And she says, quote, "Practice strategic patience." That's a good quote. I like that. I mean, you could do that anytime. That's not a bad advice at all. It reminds me of the Tai Chi teacher I had once. Then she had this sign on her wall saying, "Make haste slowly." So I always like that. Very similar. And then finally, Joey Yap in his 2025 Year of the Wood Snake says it's a year of, quote, "transformation on every level." There's that word again. "Strategic moves, bold decisions, and not playing it safe." So that was sort of the ones that really I enjoyed. And like I said, I'll put the links to their YouTube channels and actually specifically where I got the information below. So it inspired me listening to that. I said, well, snake is actually one of my totems that I use. That's part of who I am. And so I do know quite a bit about working with snake. And I thought it was just a great symbol, and to sort of talk about the year in some of the symbols of the year. And I think the first experience I ever had with snake as something special for me was when I'd left my practices with Tibetan Buddhism in my early 30s, and I was really just following a broad path around the goddess. And so I was reading all kinds of different goddesses from Greek to Roman and books about it and about Psyche and Eros. And I started dreaming a lot about snakes. And I had big snakes, little snakes, pink snakes, purple snakes. Of course, it's very phallic. But what I found out was Vicky Noble, in one of her books about that it's connected to the goddess, I forget which one, she says it's really common for women who initially delve deeply into the goddess work to have dreams about snakes. And I forget if there was a reason for it or if it's just something she had noticed. I thought, well, that's really cool. That's exactly what's happening to me. And so that was my first sort of indication that I might have some connection to snake. And then I started using Jamie Sam's and David Carson's medicine cards. And I still love the book that goes with those cards. I reread it all the time. And so I really, really love what she says about snake medicine. I often go back and reread it. And the main word I would use to describe the year, according to the snake, is transmutation, because that is what she talks about the snake medicine being, not transformation, which is different. And when you think about a snake, it doesn't really transform. It sheds its skin, but it's still a snake. But that concept of transmutation is what really stuck with me from Jamie Sam's and David Carson's interpretation. And I wanted to share what she means by it. I'm going to share a fairly lengthy quote because it's just fantastic, and you'll get a really clear understanding of what she sees this very powerful medicine to be. Beginning quote, "This medicine teaches you on a personal level that you are a universal being. Through accepting all aspects of your life, you can bring about the transmutation of the fire medicine. This fire energy, when functioning on the material plane, creates passion, desire, procreation, and physical vitality. On the emotional plane, it becomes ambition, creation, resolution, and dreams. On the mental plane, it becomes intellect, power, charisma, and leadership. When this snake reaches the spiritual plane, it becomes wisdom, understanding, wholeness, and connection to the Great Spirit." End quote. So the transmutation of fire. So that is the full sort of phrase I'll use for 2025. And that goes along with all of the fiery planets that we're going to have this year. So, and then that concept of alchemy. Many of us here in the United States are going through some very difficult times, and we can't completely escape them. And so we need to find a way to work with them. And that concept of transmutation also appealed to me at the time when I first read about it, because I was still connecting into the Tibetan Buddhist philosophy. And I had previously read Chogyam Trungpa's Rinpoche, his book, I think it was Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, that he has the 5 Buddha families in it. And with Vajrayana Buddhism is one of those paths where it can be definitely misunderstood. It's considered to be the fastest path of the 3 paths in Tibetan Buddhism, where you basically use everything for enlightenment. And of course, you have to have a basis in the Mahayana tradition, and particularly because of the concept of bodhicitta. But still, there's this whole sort of teaching that I read in his book, and I sort of reviewed it to remind myself of the 5 Buddha families. And this relates to how to transmute some of the basic neurotic tendencies we have as people. And so maybe I'll go ahead and share. I was going to sort of share it as the advice part, but I'll go ahead and share it right now anyway. So for instance, there's the family that is the Vajra family. And so the 5 families in the Buddha families are Vajra, Ratna, Padma, Karma, and Buddha. And honestly, there's just so much information on these families, like the colors, the directions, everything, that it would take at least a couple shows to do. Maybe we'll do a show on it at some point. But I wanted to demonstrate what is sort of meant by transmuting something instead of transforming it. So for instance, the Vajra family is associated with anger. And when it's transmuted, it's into mirror-like wisdom. And so he says, Trungpa Rinpoche says, in the cloudiness, possessiveness, and aggression of anger, there are qualities of brilliance, lucidity, and great energy. And I'm sure you've had that experience when you've just been so mad and you've sort of sat with it that you had this flash of insight about something, some clarity that helped you to understand the truth. And so by transmuting the neurotic poison or the klesha, whatever you want to call it, you're getting something from it. So it's very alchemical. And I think we live in times where that's probably necessary to teach ourselves, how do we do that? How do we sit with our fear? How do we work with that anger so that we get this wisdom associated with it? And so that I got kind of excited about this whole snake as a symbol of the year because of that, because that's a method. That's something you can use to work with overall. And then I'll also to quickly go over some of the other ones. And by the way, especially if you're into Buddhism, when we first were studying the 5 Buddha family, everyone's like, well, which one are you? Are you Vajra or Ratna? And it's sometimes, it's what is your tendency, right? And sometimes you're like a combination of two. So it's actually kind of fun to kind of figure out like which family you fit into too. And there's a lot more to it, like I said, if you read it. So the next one is the energy of Ratna. And when it's, not in good, it's expressed sort of poorly, it's pride or arrogance. And this can be transmuted into equanimity. The next is the Padma family. It's associated with fire, and it's basically passion. So that's what it is in terms of its distortion. And this can be transmuted into discriminating wisdom. The karma one is manifest as jealousy. And the wisdom of that is all accomplishing. So think about being jealous and working with that energy, and that turns into the ability to accomplish so much in your life. And I think that's also really accurate when you think of how jealousy works. The Buddha energy I've always found really kind of a little bit difficult to understand. And Trungpa Rinpoche says it's connected to stupidity or ignorance. And then the wisdom is the fundamental all-pervading awareness. So I don't quite know how to work with that, but I think if you were to look it up more, there's more detail in some of the explanations of what the 5 Buddha families are. So I think that's kind of a really good way to look at the year in terms of a symbol to work with because of the Chinese, the wood snake. And by the way, you look at the different elements and they mean different things with the Chinese astrology. So I kind of encourage you to look and see what the wood is about and some of these videos about the Chinese New Year and the animal for the year. So that was the main thing I wanted to say about the snake from Jamie Sam's book and the 5 Buddha families. And then I wanted to share some of the things I have discovered working with the snake as a totem. So I don't think I thought it was my totem right away, but I did have some interesting experience with real snakes. And one of the ways you can sort of discover a totem is by running into them in the wild, or maybe they adopt you, like suddenly you're the owner of a snake. You never really set out to do that. And you look and see, what's going on with you, or is it kind of an unusual encounter? And I had 2 unusual encounters. One was the snake is in many cultures, the snake is seen as very positive. And one of the symbols of the snakes is connected to healing, of course. And I was with a friend of mine, and we were doing this counseling session on a rock. And we would go to this rock and in sort of the wilderness just to do it because it was really cool. And we had some privacy. And there was one time we went back, and I forget if it was, I guess it was, we went back there and there was a snake skin there that had been shed. And he thought it was for me for some reason. So I kept it. I still have it. So I have this, I don't even know what kind of snake it is actually. That was one thing. And then another time when I was again studying a lot of the goddess wisdom books and traditions in my early 30s or even late 20s, I think, I was outside sleeping in a tent by this stream in my friend's backyard. And I got up, and the stream was really nice. And there was a rock, and I saw this snake, and it looked really strange. His head looked really weird. And at first I thought it had died and sort of thrown something up. And what it was he was, or it, I don't know, female or male, if snakes are what they are, their genders, but was basically trying to devour a fish. And it had unhinged its jaw and was in the process of drawing it in. And so it hidden under this rock. And I didn't have a camera at the time, but I felt so sort of honored to see this process. It was really amazing. And I, certainly didn't disrupt the snake in its process. And so I had, these sort of unexpected encounters with the snake, and started to think, well, maybe there's some connection here with me and the snake. So a couple other things I can say about the snake for myself is snake is about also being direct in your communication. And so people with the snake medicine, because of the concept of the venom in a lot of snakes, it's not that you're necessarily nasty to people, but you're very direct, and you can learn to sort of control that directness. And I have been like that most of my life. And it certainly has gotten me in trouble sometimes. So I've learned to sort of maybe not do it as much. What else about the snake? Movement is very important for snake people. And dancing is really one way that they can move that Kundalini energy. Just any kind of dancing, particularly anything that moves the hips. And of course, connected to sexuality. And you could certainly do Kundalini yoga. And then another thing about the snake, which I often have to remind myself, which is a good reminder this year too, is the snake knows how to glide through life and to sort of like take the twists and turns of life and still have a good life and enjoy life. And as I've gotten older, that particular concept really appeals to me about the snake. So those are some of the things that I have learned using the snake as a totem, and could be integrated into, advice for how would I, operate this year, particularly in stressful situations. I would also like to share what I found out through the I Ching. And so, usually I do a card reading of some kind for the year ahead. And this year I thought, I love the I Ching. Aleister Crowley thought it was one of the top 2 oracle systems. And I've used it in the past and I've always wanted to go a little deeper with it. And the translation that we bought is really cool. It's basically it's called The Complete I Ching, the Definitive Translation by Taoist Master Alfred Wong. And his story is so incredible, where he's imprisoned for quite a long time. And he talks about that. And I think that alone is really cool, and why he decided to do this translation. So I'm using this I Ching. And I asked the question, what's the advice for the United States for 2025? And look, I understand that this is sort of a broad question. And I guess, people listening that might think this would be helpful, because I know obviously you can't give advice for all of the people in the United States. Nevertheless, the oracle systems can be helpful. And so I threw the coins and I got number 32, Heng, Heng, and it's called long lasting. And it means persistence, perseverance, long lasting. The quote, the message of this Gao is that sincerity, purity, and unselfishness are the essential elements of a long-lasting relationship, end quote. Okay, so that does sound like, could that be positive or negative? Does that mean the situation's going to be long-lasting? I got from reading the whole thing, it was more like basically having a longer view of things. And you'll see why I thought that. So when you look into it's like many of the I Ching books, there are different sections. I had no changing lines in this one. And under the significance, I thought I would read this because it was a pretty good quote too. He writes, quote, thus the superior person stands firm and does not change his aim. The Chinese believe that the way of nature is always correct. Because it is always correct, it is long lasting. The Chinese concept of correctness is that it is free from deviation. Any excess or insufficiency represents deviation is not right. The secret of success is to walk along the central path. That is, never overreact. What is exactly right can be long lasting, end quote. So the main thing is you see what they mean by long lasting, how it's based on nature, but walking the middle path, the central path. And I really like the reminder not to overreact. And that's really hard to do for us in this country right now, because that's exactly what a lot of the current leaders are trying to get you to do, because it throws you off, and it throws you off center, and it exhausts you. So that is very important. And then just to make you feel better about the concept of long lasting, according to this particular book, that the prerequisite is to be steadfast and upright. So this reminder that being steadfast, being upright, being authentic is still going to help us, even if it doesn't seem to be doing it right now. And sort of holding firm to that. It also says a little later on that depending on the situation, it's line 6, I'll kind of jump to that the way of long lasting is to let the situation determine one's changes and transformation. So here's that word transformation. That was part of the snake, the wood snake here. So it does show that there's this idea that maybe we'll need to be flexible according to what is going on, that you don't have this set game plan. I'm always going to be doing this or that, and that it depends on what's going on. And then I also liked the line 5, the message there. He writes, quote, "The core message of this line is that by acting properly, one will be free from unnecessary action later." So almost like, you can avoid mistakes or needing to clean something up by actually considering your actions as you do them. And then the line 5 goes on talking about in history that there are different social mores and constraints that you have to adjust according to those. And so again, that's adding maybe a little bit more flexibility to what actions we can do. And then again was emphasizing that walking the central path is the way to succeed, and not having either excess or insufficiency of action. And so I thought, well, that's actually really, really good advice. And I think even, for most people that are participating in what's going on, or at least witnessing what's going on in this really difficult time in the United States, where we appear to have a coup because of Elon Musk and his gang. The other thing that I was really excited about throwing the I Ching was, for the first time, I looked at Aleister Crowley's association, the card associated with this particular hexagram. And I've always wanted to sort of learn that system with Aleister Crowley's cards. And so another symbol for the year, we've got the snake, we have this hexagram, and now we also have the Knight of Swords. And for those of you who are Waite fans, that is the King of Swords. And so the Knight of Swords, I'll just read the description of it, because I always like to do that with Aleister Crowley's cards. I'm not sure why. It's just really, it's really fun. He says, quote, "The Knight of Swords represents the fiery part of air." Get that? Fiery part of air. I'll come back to that. He is the wind, the storm. He represents the violent power of motion applied to an apparently manageable element. He rules from the 21st degree of Taurus to the 20th degree of Gemini. He is a warrior helmed, and for his crest he bears a revolving wing. Mounted upon a maddened steed, he drives down the heavens, the spirit of the tempest. In one hand is a sword, and the other a poniard. He represents the idea of attack. And so that's just his description of it, though he does call it extended flame of mind. So of course, the knight sits in the same position as the 2, where the suit of wands are. And so when you think about the astrology of the year, where you have some of the outer planets, you have two outer planets. We have Saturn and Neptune going to be going into Aries this year, and Uranus into Gemini. So you have that fire and air. And then we'll be talking about that on our next sort of longer show with the prediction. So I love that description of the Knight of Swords. What is my view of that? Well, I could see that as representing positively. It shows sort of independently acting on what you think would be the right thing to do, based on the fact that the swords occupy the middle pillar, and the knight, the right-hand path, which is very individualistic. Even though the Knight of Swords has some ability to reason, it can, all of the knights can be very passionate, stubborn, and their downfall is their ego. And so I think we're dealing with a lot of really strong egos that have really strong ideas, not necessarily based on what is right for the country. And so nevertheless, I think the symbol of the Knight of Swords says that we, each of us, have the ability to maintain our own life and do what we think is right within the situation, whether it is to do something as an activist, whether it is to lead the life that you really feel is the right life for you to do, even if it doesn't have an immediate impact on society. So I think it is important that people still have the freedom to do the things they think that are right in their life this year, and not sort of cave in to either overreacting or too much fear or too much anger. However, going back to the snake, we have a way to transmute the anger and to transmute the fear, using that snake as the idea that it's not these are not bad things. It's just that we want to find a way to utilize the energy behind it. And that is the power of the snake medicine. And speaking of that, there was something at the end of the quote that I really wanted to include with Jamie Sam. So after the part I just read, she says about the snake medicine, quote, "This is heavy magic, but remember, magic is no more than a change in consciousness. Become the magician or the enchantress. Transmute the energy and accept the power of fire." And I can say, from living not too far from LA, when they really had to deal with the fire element, and I think that is very much part of this year, that element of fire, the alchemy that you can use to take the base energies of the self and transmute it into something higher. Is this going to be easy? No, but anything that you ever want to do in life is not necessarily easy. So it's certainly a very big challenge. But I think collectively there's enough people that can sort of make this work. I'm a realist, but I'm also optimistic about things. And remember that how you live in the world and how you work with the world has a ripple effect. Even if you're just one person and you're practicing compassion and kindness, or truth in your own community. So remember, you don't always have to make grand gestures in order to really have an impact on the world. It's those ripple effects of things that really add up. And so if we have enough ripples that want to do something that would lead us into something more positive, then I think this year could be very, very interesting and meaningful. But certainly it's not been an easy start. However, there's still many months to come, and we'll see what happens. And then, of course, we will talk about more of the astrology in detail in our next show, as well as the numerology, which is really quite fascinating as well. It's a 9 year, so that's an odd number. And we're going to find out what that means from Carrie Jane and talk about that as well. So I hope that you are able to, keep your center somewhat during this period, wherever you are in the world, because I know there are other countries going through some difficulties as well. And there's some very positive things as well, which we're going to bring up in the show too. So I'm very grateful for you for listening in. I hope you have a magical week. Join us next time as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together.